you for coming this morning. I would also want to thank our panel for reading the essay, Mr. Klan and Bruner. And actually, we have a professor, Hollingshead, David Hollingshead from Brown University, who can't be here, but he sent comments to me, and I'll act on his behalf, and I'd like to thank him as well for his contribution and work. And I'd like to thank you, Carol. Yes, and congratulations, because it's an excellent essay. And if I may, I'll just read the professor's comments on it. He says, I want to indicate, first of all, how much I enjoyed reading Carolina's extended essay assignment. This is a remarkable work, given the author's age and educational level. If the skills on display here are any indication, I have no doubt Carolina will thrive in a post-secondary academic environment, where work like this will stand out for its sophistication and depth analysis. So congratulations. Let me just explain how we're going to proceed. Yeah? So Carol will open in a minute. She's going to present 10-15 minutes about her research and how she came to do the essay on Oscar Wilde. And then we'll have a round of 5 minutes of questions, more general questions to Carol about the nature of the essay and her research. And then we'll move into a phase of suggestions, very sort of more specific suggestions about the extended essay. And then we'll go back to Carol, and I'll ask Carol, what you feel you can take away from these suggestions to you, Carol. All right. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Carol to present.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sweetman. Hi everyone, my name is Carolina Nascimento, and this morning I'll be presenting about my English extended essay. So the topic of my EE is Oscar Wilde's Ballad of Reading Gaol. It is his most famous poem. Oscar Wilde was a poet, playwright, and author. He was Irish and he lived in the 19th century. He was imprisoned in 1893 under the accusation of indecency for being a homosexual because he had an affair with a noble at the time, and therefore he was imprisoned in 1893. In 1895, he was released from Reading Gaol, where he spent the last few months of his imprisonment, and in 1897, 2 years after that, he published Ballad of Reading Gaol. The Ballad of Reading Gaol, like I said, is his most famous poem. On that note, the question that my essay seeks to answer is, how does the format of Oscar Wilde's The Ballad of Reading Gaol impact the expression and development of the themes in the poem? And actually, the image depicted here is of Oscar Wilde's tomb in the Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris. And I thought it was a good addition to this slide because this was actually sent to me by Mr. Diamond when he visited, and it's covered in kisses because actually until 2011 it was a common tradition among tourists to apply lipstick and kiss the tongue. I don't really know why, but I thought it was a good addition to the presentation. So the argument that I tried to make in my EE is that actually what Oscar Wilde did when he wrote the ballad, was that he used the lyrical elements of the ballad, this musicality that a ballad has, that to heighten his themes of redemption among the prisoners, themes of collective guilt, themes of reality versus imagination among the prisoners and to the readers ourselves. And also that he wanted to convey emotion and actually critique prison brutality at the time of Victorian England. So that was my argument. The structure of the essay is very simple. I start with my introduction, and then with the body, I talk about the context of a poem. I talk a little bit about his life because it's important to understand his story in order to understand the poem. I then talk about the themes of redemption and collective guilt. I talk about the history of balladry and the sound effects that ballads entail. I talk about Wilde's language and writing choices. I talk about then the general theme that the ballad embroils, which is reality versus imagination, and then I conclude and I have my recited page. So the first steps of my research process, I would very much call it fate, because I've always been a quote junkie, and I have this app for quotes, and I've always collected Oscar Wilde quotes, and I just love the way he writes, but I didn't really know who he was. And as I started my research process and figuring out what I was going to do for my extended essay, I literally Googled great poems of history, and the Ballad of Reading Gaol came up, and I figured out it was written by Oscar Wilde, and it was literally destiny. So I was very glad that I was able to find out more about his life through analyzing the Ballad of Reading Gaol. So when I found the Ballad of Reading Gaol, I decided to go with it. I presented my interest to my advisor last year, Ms. Palmer, and she said that was fine, and I talked about why I was interested in the Ballad of Reading Gaol, and I looked for initial sources immediately. So the research process was very much simple, I would say, because I was analyzing a piece of literature. That was the ballad. What I did, and I highlighted this because it was the most important part, I annotated the poem so intensely, and I annotated every single stanza, every single verse, every single metaphor, and so that was it for the poem. I also, because I said the context of the poem is very much connected to Oscar Wilde's life, and that is why I read his biography in the Poetry Foundation. Then, what really helped me write the poem was the fact that I read past analysis of this poem through the works that were done by critics of Wilde, by experts on Wilde, by the biographers of Wilde. And I found those through these academic search engines such as EBSCOhost, JSTOR, and ProQuest Literature Learning. And because of that, I was actually able to open my mind about everything that I could write about this ballad. And finally, I acquired this book called The Complete Letters of Oscar Wilde. This was actually published by his only grandson, Merlin Holland. And through the letters that he wrote before prison, during prison, like in prison, and after prison, I was able to find more about what he thought about this ballad and about his experience in prison. So those were mainly the 4 categories of my research. Through meetings with Ms. Palmer last year, she gave me a lot of direction, and she would tell me, so research more about this because this is missing on your essay and everything. So she didn't conduct, but she directed a lot of my research, and I conducted it at home, so that was really helpful. I did take notes every step of the way. I registered sources, so every time I would, and I'll show you this in the next slide, every time I would research about his life or this certain analysis or maybe the ballad itself, it was really important to take note of every source that I was looking at because I didn't want to lose track and afterwards just get crazy while doing my works cited page, so that is why I registered sources and I highlighted all the important information that I thought to include in my essay. And regarding time management, it was very simple for me during the Christmas break of my year 1. I researched everything, and during Carnaval I stopped, and for 4 days I just wrote my essay, and that was it. So that was really positive, at least in my research process. What my notes look, and this is just a glimpse of my notes, I have much more than this, but the thing that I did was kind of use that Cornell method of note-taking, where I wrote the topic, which was Oscar Wilde's biography. I made sure to always put the source right next to it and write everything down. And what I meant by highlighting important information is that, for example, this is one of the analysis of the ballad, and I would highlight everything that would, make my essay a little bit more interesting, a little bit more open, and that is how I highlighted important information. I also really enjoyed and I benefited from using the Oxford Dictionary of Literary Terms because my essay was in literature. So what I did was I kind of compiled everything together that came from the same source, such as iamb and tetrameter. So this is how I organized my notes. So the writing process. When I had finished researching and I was ready to start my writing process, I was kind of panicking that I didn't really know how to start my introduction. And a great tip that I got at the beginning of my writing process from a law professor, namely my dad, he told me, write the body first and write everything you want to write, and then you will get a notion of what to write in your intro and conclusion. As a result of that, I went over the word count just in the body section. I went over 5,000 words. And what I had to do, because I was obligated to narrow it down, I had to really see the key points of my essay and everything that I thought was actually crucial. Because in a 4,000 word essay, you can actually get repetitive and, start rambling at some point. So because of that, I benefited a lot from just writing the body. Then I did my conclusion, and then I had enough information to include in my intro. So that was really good. and I always footnoted everything, as I would include facts and data and even passages from the poem. I would always footnote and include that. So when I did my works cited page, I would make my life easier. And lastly, I did the works cited, the table of contents, abstract, and acknowledgements. As a result, research only gave me further direction. The more I researched, the more I had to write. New paths were in my research, and that was really good. I found out that really the more you research, the more knowledge that you are going to have, obviously, but the more flexible you can be about what you write. So you start this process thinking that you're going to write about a certain thing, and this is actually this diagram that I drew. You start this process thinking that you're going to write about a certain thing, and then you find out that you're going to talk about not something completely different, but additional things that you didn't even know about. So I did start this process with the following question. How does the specific form of the ballad and literary strategies Oscar Wilde writes in the Ballad of Reading Gaol impact the reader? And I formulated this research question very much in the mindset of high school, like we analyze metaphors and imagery and everything. And what my advisor, with the help of my advisor, what she made me realize is that actually the ballad had much more than that. The ballad had sound effects. The ballad had a structure that was not explored. So because of her direction and because of her advices, I came up with the question that we have today. So that was really important. And the thing here is that not only did the question change, but my outline also changed. I thought that I was going to write this essay theme by theme, and that was going to be my body. The body section of my essay, and in reality, it was not what occurred. I talked about his writing choices, I talked about his life. So because of that, the outline changed. So this is just a little screenshot of my works cited page. As you can see up there, I mentioned my primary text, and that's why it says 1898 print right there, because that's when the ballad was published. And then I also included the printed sources and my web sources. So this is my works cited page. And the final product, this is the cover of my essay, and I included the word counts, which thankfully I was able to narrow down. And this is the cover of the essay. So, some learning outcomes. Academically speaking, this is a 4,000-word essay, and therefore it was hard. We all in high school are used to writing 1,000-word essay, 1,500 words in the maximum. And when I found myself having to write a 4,000-word essay, I kind of panicked because I had never written something in that length. But one thing that I really did learn is that in your first draft and at the first time that you're going to start writing, don't be afraid of repetitives. You're going to be repetitive, and the only thing that matters is that you fix it later when you go over it with your advisor and everything. But don't be afraid of repetitiveness. It does happen to every single one of us. You will learn to fix it. The other thing that I realized is that organization is key. Organization in your sources, organization in your writing, organization in the information that you put in your essay. If you're not organized, you're going to find yourself so puzzled at the end of your essay that you're not going to be able to write your conclusion. You're not going to be able to write your abstract. So organization is really key. That is why I emphasize that it's important to take notes every step of the way. And also, what I mean about effective communication is that this is something that I do a lot, but posh and sophisticated words are not always the way to go. Although I did spend a lot of my time while writing this essay in thesaurus.com, sometimes I would write something and that wouldn't make sense. And not only that, but what I wanted to say, the message that I wanted to give away to the reader of my extended essay was much better expressed through the use of simpler language. So just a takeaway from me and a tip for you, don't think that just because you're going to put a lot of SAT words in there, it's going to make a difference. It won't most of the time. Some personal learning outcomes for me is that efficient time management is gratifying. I knew myself, and I knew that I was not going to be able to do this extended essay throughout the school year, and this weekdays, and I had a lot of homework and everything, so I knew I was not going to be able to do that. So I gave up some of my free time during these school breaks to produce my essay, and I do not regret it at all. The thing about interest in your topic is that the interest in your topic equals fun in the process. Don't choose a topic, and I'm thankful that I didn't, that is going to bore you to death, because trust me, you're going to spend a lot of time reading about this, so you don't want to be bored, of course. And for the perfectionists in the audience, like me, you're not going to be able to rewrite your essay forever, although you want to keep correcting it and never turn it in. There is no way you won't turn it in. So although you want to perfect your essay all the time, don't think that you can. Be confident in the work that you put into, and I'm sure you'll do great. So tips for writing your essay. For those of you who are starting your extended essay journey now, ask yourself, what is it that I enjoy learning about the most? What sparks your curiosity? And really, do ask yourself that, because when I asked myself that, the answer was English. And when I set the goal, I want to write an essay about English, I went to all of the upperclassmen, the year 2s, when I was in year 1, and I gathered all of the English extended essays, and I read them all, and thankfully they were on books and poems, and that gave me a little sense of direction on where to go. And thankfully I found it didn't have to be the author that they dealt with, but it was Oscar Wilde for me. But I did base myself on some examples from last year. So do take a chance and go to the people that did the topic that you're interested in, and that will benefit you a lot. Don't be so hard on yourself, don't stress. Really, if you start early, there's no reason to stress. There's no reason to panic all the time, and it's not going to be fun at all if you stress. However, prioritize. Make a plan. Plan ahead, like I said, and prioritize. The next item is really just time managed to protect yourself from anxiety, stress, and preoccupation, because you don't want this essay to get into a snowball, and it's this giant thing that you have to do at the end. Thankfully, you guys are probably going to do this in your year 1 anyway, so this is a really good tip for you. So, to make your life easier, and when I say this, I really mean it, as soon as you choose your topic, decide what subject area that fits into, and go read the IB Extended Essays criteria for that specific subject area. Trust me, it's going to make your life so much easier. You're going to know what not to include in the essay, you're going to know what to include in the essay, and that will earn you higher marks. So that is really important. There is no recipe for the extended essay, but again, I would say just plan, take your time researching, really look at all of the options that are available to you, and when actually you make the decision, gather as many sources on that topic as you can, and really guys, take notes until your fingertips are numb, and just read that criteria and start writing. Don't overthink it too much, just start writing and you will see that you will get the flow eventually. And really, this is your project. This is I think this was an enjoyable process for me, because what happened was this was my project to personalize it, to actually create from scratch. And this is what's going to happen to you, I hope. This is your project to start. This is your project to build from scratch. So have fun, don't stress, and really just take your time and choose a topic that will interest you. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Very nice, Carol, excellent. Yeah, just for the young ones here, some great, just to sum up for 10 seconds, some great advice there about the research. Make sure you keep a note of all your research. The sequencing of the essay, do the intro last. We often find it difficult to get going. Do the intro last, that's a great tip. We make new discoveries as we go along. It's organic, the question changes maybe. About the drafting, don't be worried about repeating, you can redraft it. Better to be clear in what you're saying and use the language you use than trying to sort of use bigger words. That's a great point. And make sure you enjoy it, choose a topic you enjoy. And that enjoyment will come through in the essay. Fantastic, Carol. All right, so we'll have a round of questions for 5 minutes or so. Bruno, would you like to start?
Yes, I think my main question, and I'm not sure how constructive this is, but it was actually, I thought of it as you were talking, and you showed your notes and the way you kept them, and I realized, but you still went a lot over the word count, right? So I was wondering, how did it help you to keep all those really concise notes too? Because I would think with all those notes, you know what you want to include, and you know what maybe you can leave to the side. So how did they help you exactly in the writing process?
I think that's the thing in my case. I found out so much to write about because the importance of these analysis, and really where the bulk of my essay, where the analysis came from, more from the past analysis of the other critics of Wilde, and the information that they provided me, I could either agree with them or contest them, which was really positive. And the thing is, they gave me so much information because they were so detailed and all, that I think what I did is I just took note of everything. I would highlight everything that I found interesting. And that gave me so many items to talk about that is why I think I went over the word count. As you can see here, everything, I had like this color code thing and organization system of my own, and everything that was, I think, in purple, I would say included essay. And at the end I had so much that I actually had to narrow it down afterwards.
Great, fantastic. Good question, good answer.
Your question is about format. And based on your research, to what degree do you believe Oscar Wilde was purposeful in, when you talk about music here, and you talk about sound, to what degree do you think he was purposeful about that, or was that something we've interpreted after the fact?
So one thing that really blew me away about this poem was that Oscar Wilde he's known for, writing The Importance of Being Earnest, which is a play, and then the Picture of Dorian Gray, which is a novel. And what I actually talk about in the introduction of my essay is that this was a kind of a thruster of a barrier, and I talk about how this was new for him. He had written poems before, but they were, like common poems. They weren't ballads, and ballads was really common at the time that Oscar Wilde was living, but he had never written a ballad. And I think writing a ballad so close to his death and after such a traumatizing experience made a way for him to express what he really wanted to express, like critique prison brutality and everything. So I think that the musicality of a ballad, of the ballad that he wrote, was really important to develop and express the themes of redemption, of not feeling like you're part of society when you're a prisoner, of facing death so closely, because he saw the death penalty of one of his inmates. So I think that the musicality just gives a rhythm to the reader, and as you're reading it, actually, guys, it gives you kind of this agonizing feeling, and you just think that you're there in the prison with him. So I think that the rhythm and the rhyming and everything that Oscar Wilde added into that helped. Yeah.
Excellent question there about intentions. How do we know the intentions of the writer? Which comes from a great question and answer here. Can I just present what a professor, one from the professor, Mr. Hamilton. He makes this point about it being an biographical poem, which you do write a lot about in your essay. And then he's saying, how do we square that with the collective kind of voice in the poem? Because of course Oscar Wilde, had that experience in prison, but he's also speaking on behalf of others. Why does he do that, I suppose? What do you make of that?
I think he does that because of the critique that he's trying to make. I think that the collective guilt that I'm talking about in my essay, because just a little context, when he writes a letter after publishing it, he says that the poem is autobiographical. However, he does talk in a collective voice. And I think that he's just trying to represent this ostracized group that are the prisoners. And he, in the essay, he always refers to we prisoners, the sky that we prisoners see. We are the devil's own brigade, the fool's parade. So I think that he puts himself, he never talks about himself. I think that's really interesting. He puts himself in the place of others because he's residing in Reading Jail, and he just talks about how they are people who don't have any honor and are not worthy of any redemption in the future in society. So I think that's why he uses collective voice so much, because he wants to be a part of that excluded group.
Right, excellent, Carol. And just one from me. People might say, mightn't they, oh, it was 100 years ago, we're reading this poem, like, what's the relevance today? So what would you say to that?
I think
you mentioned he's a great writer, but why is it worthy of reading? Your own passion for him, he's a great writer. What would you say, that sense of, we're reading him now, the relevance today? Does he still have something to say to us?
I think he speaks to me. I'm such a fan of him. I'm really a sucker for Wilde. But what I think, he's so brilliant in expressing emotion, and he's so brilliant in making you feel like the person that he's talking about. So, like I said, when I was reading about the prisoners, I felt sad for them and I felt sorry for them. And I think that not only is a very good technique that modern writers also have, but Wilde is Wilde. I think that that is eternal. I think that that is intrinsic to literature, just making the reader feel like he's right there, like you're right there, and conveying emotion. On the other hand, I think it's important because prison brutality and exclusion from society of prisoners is existence in our society until today. And what does redemption really mean for prisoners? Can a criminal actually be redeemed in society? And especially because the subject of the poem is a guy who murdered his wife. He talks about him. However, Wilde was imprisoned for being a homosexual. And although that doesn't happen in today's society, this exclusion of this minority group does happen. So I think that he embroiled everything inside of this poem, and that I think was what left me in awe.
Right, excellent answer, Carol.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're still the same human beings, aren't we? We've got the technology groups that have the same emotions, they transcend time. Excellent. Bruno, do you have another question?
I have a couple of suggestions, but
Let's go to suggestions. Let's move on to suggestions for another 5 minutes. That's perfect timing, really. Want to share one of those?
so first, I just want to say, and I talked to you about this, like,
I'm just freezing, so I can take
Yeah.
notes.
and I talked to you about this, like, I thought your essay was extremely well written, and it was hard for me as I read it to think of anything I could suggest even. But I found that as I was reading the introduction, and then gradually that led into the body of your essay, I had a moment where I was like, okay, what am I looking out for? So it was like, I was reading your essay and it all made perfect sense, but I was like, where's this leading me? Where am I going? So I went back to the introduction to see maybe there was something missing there that could have clarified it. And I saw that your research question wasn't explicitly stated in the intro.
In the intro.
Yeah, and so I thought that would help the reader a lot when reading the rest of your essay, because then they know exactly where you're going when you're reading it. So that's my main suggestion.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good, Bruno.
I had the same feeling when I read it. Something a little bit different, though. You talk about this in the end, kind of scope. Thank you for sharing this research with me. Well, I had not read the ballad before. It's profound. And I thought your research and the way you presented everything and the depth of thought was tremendous. And I was very impressed. One of the best extended essays I've ever read. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, about the scope, the thing that you talk about expanding on that. I know you don't have space for it, but I really felt that idea of social injustice, society just blindly following reforms, but that's such a powerful other piece of that, which you touch on. I think that you're limited in this space.
But yeah,
I do have a quick question though. You have about 9 references, sources that you dug into. When you thought deeply about that, were there any themes that you felt you didn't agree with, that you just thought differently, or was it, this is reinforcing, this is how I see things?
I think there is one of the arguments of one of his analysts where I didn't agree, because he said that Wilde in the essay was putting himself at a superior position to that of the prisoners, and he was actually in the ballad he was presenting how miserable they were and how he was superior, and I completely disagree with that. I thought that Wilde was actually, if anything, being so humble to put himself in this collective voice, as Mr. Sweetman mentioned, and in any way was putting himself in a superior position. So that was something I really disagreed with. Yeah.
Thank you.
From the professor, he had suggestions just about your style, Carol, the way you're writing it. And he just pointed out that passive voice, where something is done, something is said. And he was just wondering perhaps you could put those more in the active, because sometimes we're not sure whether it's your voice, or is it a critic that you're paraphrasing, or is it Wilde himself, who's actually the subject of the sentence, particularly what you're making a comment about the poem.
Okay.
So, and sort of reversing that so it's in the active, it also makes it sort of more powerful, you're right, he makes a comment about that.
Okay.
But that's just a straightforward suggestion from the professor. And then in your intro, Carol, from me, I was thinking this idea of context, of putting it in a context or a body of knowledge, and you talk about balladry and so on. the ballad tradition. I thought you could also put it in the tradition, a literary tradition of other ballads, because to me, the allusions to other poetry.
So literary context of ballads.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, for example, Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is clearly an influence on the poet. Yeah? You know, which other poet is Wilde sort of drawing on? We wouldn't go into too much detail there, but that could be something to think about. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. We might have time for one more suggestion.
Actually, the other one I had was exactly about the comment from the professor with some statements like, I wrote it down, Wilde's purpose is, and I thought maybe something like that could, I was unsure about exactly that, like, is she analyzing this? Is this something she read? And I thought maybe something more like, I don't know, Wilde's, from this it seems that Wilde's purpose may be,
okay.
do you know what I mean? That's the thought I had.
To be more direct, it's my opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So active voice.
Active voice,
Okay.
yeah. There's just sometimes in the essay, I think that it's clearer than it's
Okay.
from you, or it make it more powerful.
Okay.
We've probably got some
That's a question.
Yeah.
This is a profound experience, clearly, for you.
Mhm.
After going through all of this research and putting this essay together, in what ways do you see the world differently now? And what did you learn from this?
I think what I learned is how powerful one's experience can be and the power of expression. I've always enjoyed writing so much, and I think that's why I'm such a fan of these authors like Oscar Wilde, and the thing is, though, I think that it kind of got to me in a personal level, because as I was finding out his life, and I said, what, he was in prison for being a homosexual, and then when I started researching about it, I saw that it was such a common thing in the Victorian era, and that just kind of got to me, and I said, well, although this doesn't happen in today's society, this really got to Wilde, because even something that I found out from the letters was that he wrote a letter to his lover. He was actually a noble. His name was Lord Alfred Douglas, and the whole history behind his imprisonment was so puzzling to me, and I just didn't understand why. And the pain I felt coming from Wilde in his poem was it touched me on a deep level. I thought that that power of not persuasion, but that power of expressing emotion through writing is something that I even want to have someday. So that was basically it for me. That's when, and I decided to write about it.
That's a nice place there to sort of wrap up, Carol, in the sense that the poem does what all great literature does, and then just extend our sympathies and make us be more thoughtful and maybe a little bit less self-righteous as human beings. And it does that now.
It does.
Just over to you then, Carol, a few takeaways for this experience today. But,
From the experience of living with the
yeah,
same.
and what you feel we've helped you with.
I think that definitely even something that Mr. Hollins had told me during the summer at Brown was that he really wanted me to have a more active voice, because I've always been reluctant to add I think, or even not I think, but something about myself, because, what am I? I'm just a high school student. I'm not going to talk with the critic of Wilde. But really, what I think is, because I thought it was informal. I thought that, no, I'm not going to add what I think, because, this is a formal essay. No one cares what I think. But this actually is my argument. So it didn't make sense in my head at the time, but it does now. So I think really including your voice in the essay is really important. It's not having others review it, but never changing your voice in the essay. I think if I hadn't been so passionate about this specific aspect of the exclusion from society, maybe my essay would have taken a whole other path. And I think just including your interests is what's this big takeaway for me.
That's a great note to finish on. Lovely. I just want to finish by thanking you all again. I thank the panel and all your effort there. Thanks to Professor Hollingshead. And thank you, Carol, and congratulations again.
Thank you.